identity and valuing the history and the heritage of Cornwall, and instilling a sense of pride in people. So some of the aims of what we tried to cover was, how do you raise aspirations with young people in Cornwall? What kind of early intervention can you do to try to help support them, where, beyond just primary education or possibly family, and also how, when those schools are already overworked and have a lot of, and under budget and all sorts of things, how do you get support from the private sector to be able to lead this, and or at least be heavily involved with it. And so we kind of created a map, sorry, those are just some aims there, and trying to think about, okay, how do we do it early on? So how do you nurture excellence? And not just, one of the things that we brought up was not just helping people to think about what kind of job they're going to get, but also to think about themselves as like a global citizen, but on a local level. So making sure that in encouraging people to think about what they might do and what careers they might do, they're also thinking about how they might be a part of the community, whether that might be volunteering, and making sure that there's an equal focus on industry as well as private sector and services as well, so people aren't all being pushed into tech, and also thinking about nursing and doctors and caring and teaching. So one of the areas that or projects that we kind of identified was around skills mentoring. So possibly businesses could, outside of schools, offer possibly a mentoring network where children could reach out to them and kind of connect with mentors and get ideas on how early on, so in primary, secondary school, how to set themselves up for being able to go towards that career in the future, and learning about the realities of it and what type of education is needed or not needed to be able to go into it. So getting to understand what's out there and what's available to them, and ideally through that as well, going back to the celebrating what's already in Cornwall, so making sure that they know that if they want to go into a certain sector, that that kind of sector is available in Cornwall and exists in Cornwall. And also encouraging things that they might be interested in but they might not realise could lead to a job. So trying to encourage them beyond just what the schools are saying a job might be, or just maybe potentially beyond just the STEM skills, to understand what else is out there. Another thing that we talked about is building on the Enterprise Foundation, which already exists in Cornwall, which is about bringing mentors into schools and trying to think about, okay, well, how can you increase that relationship and extend it, possibly digitising it and basically build on it and work with that existing programme to build on it. And how do you map and find these business volunteers and help get them involved in all of this? And what we thought as well is, we've got these ideas, but what a little bit of groundwork that needs to be done in terms of understanding how to grow them is really, one, helping to work with local communities to identify what the sectors are in Cornwall. So not just being prescriptive and saying these are what exists in Cornwall, but actually reaching back out to people and saying what sectors are a part of our cultural heritage, as well as what sectors are growing here, because it's a very well, it's a constantly changing thing, and also it's down to perspective. Exactly, it depends on who you talk to. So it's important to get a wide breadth of information rather than just being prescriptive, which is what tends to happen when it comes from central government, is there's only some areas focused on, and so allowing it to be wider than that. And also making sure that there's a focus on Cornish values and valuing identity. But also critically, as we were discussing all these ideas, people kept popping up of, oh, well, this exists already a little bit, or something like that's already there. So to get started, we need to underpin it with intelligence. So really understand of how, ways to reach the kids, ways to interact with the schools in a positive way. We need to do a mapping exercise to understand what businesses might be interested in it and how much time they'd be willing to give and what kind of skills they've got. And then from all of that, understand what's possible to build. We talked about the fact that it doesn't necessarily need to be a physical thing, or it doesn't need to necessarily be time inclusive. Well, it's time heavy, but it doesn't necessarily need to be costed or funded if it's using things like a digital network, or playing on people's goodwill and hoping that they might volunteer time even if they might not have money to volunteer. So trying to think of ways to not have it be reliant on funding. And one of the aims with that, in addition to the fact that you've got to get funding, is also so that it can bring in other funded groups and not feel like they're competing, but actually help them connect to work together. Whereas if it was seen as something that was attracting funding, then you could create too much competition, or they might see it as a threat. So how to keep it so it's not threatening to other existing organisations and instead is building on what they're already doing.
That's great.
Thank
you.
Anything else to chip in? And maybe a free school.